and move that up right after the budget overview, because I see a lot of you are here to talk, or at least in relation to that particular item. So we'll start out, we'll do the fire assessment, then we'll do roads and bridges, then we'll take a short break, and then we'll continue on through the rest of it. So with that, Frank, I don't know who's going to start up with the overview, you or Jill?
Let's do that. If we're going to move things around, that's going to make it difficult for us, and because it's all by PowerPoint.
Oh, is it already?
Yeah, it's all by PowerPoint, so let me try to get through some of this, and if we can make the adjustment, we'll of course.
Okay, yeah, if it's problematic from a technical standpoint, just let me know, and we can kind of keep it as is.
So anyway, let's get started. I want to thank the board for the opportunity today for us to get together with you and have hopefully some dialogue with you about where we are, where we've been, where we're going relative to the budget. We're looking at this from a staff perspective as an opportunity to talk on a fairly high level. We're going to do this a little bit differently than what's happened in some of the prior years, where we've given you a lot of specific numbers. We've talked about the color of money, et cetera, but you've all been through that. So we, multiple times, many of you. And so what we're going to do is try to address issues that we know we've heard the board talk about over time. And this is really an opportunity for all of us, staff especially, to hear where you are on a variety of issues so we can move forward preparing this year's budget and moving forward beyond that in a longer term range. So that's really what the goal is for us today. So we welcome input as we go through this in terms of what the board has, and hopefully you'll find that where we're headed is very much aligned with things that I've heard and other staff members has heard from the board, over the last several years. So with that, we're going to, just to give you an idea what we're going to do, we're going to briefly go over the adopted budget very quickly. I do want to speak to the issue of the Citizens Budget Review Committee, where we are with them, and give you a little bit of overview there. After that, we're going to try to make that adjustment and go to fire assessment first. And then subsequent to that, we will follow everything else that is in order that in the presentation outline. We are going to be using, as you will see, I'm very confident in our staff, and so they are going to be making a lot of the presentation for their particular departments. And with that, let me turn it over to Jill.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So the first several slides, we're just going to give a very broad overview of the fiscal year 2019-2020 adopted budget. So this first chart shows the budget and just a broad overview of the adopted revenues, and the total budget was just over $1.3 billion. So Florida statute, chapter 129, establishes the guidelines for the annual budget of counties. And one of the most fundamental requirements is that the budget must be balanced so that all estimated receipts from taxes and other sources, along with funds being carried forward, equal the appropriation of expenditures and reserves. So again, this chart shows the revenue side of that. The operating revenues, which are in blue, those represent the recurring portion of our budget. So this includes property taxes, permits, fees, charges for services, intergovernmental revenue, and things of that nature. And we're going to show additional detail on the operating revenue in the next slide. What balance forward represents, which is there in the green, is the funds being brought forward from the prior fiscal year. So these are dollars that were collected in the prior year that are being carried forward. And these can be carried forward and unspent for a variety of purposes. Primarily, one of the largest portions of the carry forward dollars are funds that are associated with multi-year capital projects that just take years to complete. The financing revenue shown here, the $18.6 million, that's primarily associated with a state revolving loan for utilities, as well as the loan for Parks and Recreation to do hurricane repairs. And then the transfer portion of this slide, this represents funds being transferred from one fund to another. So an example of that would be we collect operating revenues in the general fund. Those funds are then transferred to different funds to fund programs and services. So those aren't new revenues coming in to those departments. They're just transfers from another fund. So this slide breaks down that operating revenue portion of the previous slide. So again, this is about 57% of the total $1.3 billion budget. And what we're showing here is that because the operating revenues have to be used for specific purposes in many cases, we wanted to break down those different fund types and just give a broad overview of what they're used for. The general funds, which are there in the green, represent the funds that can be used for any governmental purpose. So that's where you have the most discretion. And in this slide, we've broken down the general funds into two shades of green. The darker green represents general government revenues, and we're going to go over those in additional detail on the next slide. The lighter shade of green represents more user service fees, which are theoretically unrestricted. However, if those dollars weren't funneled back into the respective programs, those programs wouldn't have the funds to exist. So a good example of that is the sheriff providing contracted services to the school board, the port, and Cape Canaveral. That light shade of green also includes parks and rec fees for campgrounds, leases, and rentals, things of that nature. The pink slice of the pie are the special revenue funds. So these account for revenues that are restricted for specific purposes. The Indian River Lagoon Trust Fund is a good example of a special revenue fund. Also, federal and state grants, as well as local option gas taxes, tourism development taxes, are all accounted for in the special revenue funds and have to be used for very specific purposes. The enterprise funds there in blue represent the operations that are financed and operated similar to private business, where the costs are funded through user charges. So these are your utility and solid waste funds. And then internal service funds account for goods and services provided by one department or agency to another. So those are primarily your health insurance fund. And then we've got capital project funds, which I do want to point out that the majority of capital projects are funded through special revenue and enterprise funds. Okay, so the next slide, the general revenue sources and uses. What I mentioned earlier is that Florida statute requires that the budget be balanced, but not only in total, but by fund and by program as well. So what this chart shows is the general revenue sources and uses. So on the left side of the slide, you can see the revenue, and this corresponds with the darker shade of green that was in the previous slide. So you've got your ad valorem taxes and other major revenues such as communication service tax, FPL franchise fee, state shared revenue. And then we add into that those balances being carried forward, as well as non-operating revenue, which is payment in lieu of taxes, transfers in, and things of that nature. So again, the general revenue side of that $1.3 billion represents about $250 million of the $1.3 billion budget. On the right side of the chart, you see a summary of how those general revenues are appropriated. Approximately 45% of the general fund dollars go to fund the charter officers. We also must fund certain things according to state statutes, such as court operations and mandates. Mandates include Medicaid, Baker Act services, commissions to the property appraiser and tax collector, pretrial detention of juveniles. So there are quite a bit of mandates that we're required to pay. So when you look at total general fund obligations, there's about $174 million of that $250 million for charter officers, mandates, courts, reserves, debt service, and other obligations. And then lower down on that slide, we show the general Board of County Commissioners general fund supported agencies, which public safety and infrastructure, we've broken out separately. These have kind of been identified as core services. So this includes, your public works, road and bridge, facilities, fire rescue, EMS, emergency management, and the medical examiner's office. And then under general fund programs and services, this includes parks and recreation, housing and human services, information technology, and other support agencies. Okay.
All right, with that general overview, what I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about is organizational initiatives that we have. And basically, what I would suggest to you is that we've been operating and are planning to continue operating on 5 or 6 pillars, which I'll call pillars, which are points that we as an organization feel are most important because that's what we understand from all the dialogue we've had with the board. And so you will see in the course of this presentation a couple of departments, I'll point out utilities specifically, but even in our budget preparation, that departments try to align what they're doing with one or more of these pillars. The first of them is what we try to do is to be inclusive, and I hope you'll hear some of that today, people we try to include in the process, and to be responsive as we can be. But as we start looking at specific things, as funding becomes more and more, important for consideration as how resources are allocated, one of the first ones you'll see there in one of our pillars is that we are doing more and more, never less, in the area of maintenance, drainage, resurfacing, and reconstruction of the county's road system. And what you're going to hear today is relative to that particular pillar, 2 additional areas that are of importance, that being bridge systems, where we are with that, which is something we really have not organizationally focused for other than what we need to do at that time for that moment. And a very important one, as you'll see during the course of the presentation, relates to capacity issues and where we are with that. And so we'll be talking about that today. In addition to that, part of that pillar, and at least in my eyes, is other infrastructure needs. I think we're making good progress in a variety of areas that, whether it's in fire rescue and what we're doing at stations or other county facilities, there's been a significant period of time from 2006, 2008 onward that things have been deferred, and we're in the catch-up mode now. We've made some progress in some areas, but there's plenty more to do, and you're going to hear more of that as we're moving forward, as we prepare to get to that better tomorrow. The Indian River Lagoon and being good stewards of that, of course, is a prime priority for the board. We understand that. We're not going to talk about that a lot today because you've got an agenda item coming up on Tuesday that's going to be dealing with that issue. We're all very committed to that, and staff is always very committed to making sure we do what we need to do to be moving in the direction that the board wants in that area. Supporting critical public safety needs. You're going to hear a lot of that today. We're going to be talking about the fire assessment. You've heard it from the sheriff in the past and other areas. We understand very clearly the board's desires in that area, and so we'll be talking about that. And then tied to that to some degree is the last pillar, which is employee compensation, recruitment and retention, things that we're doing in the area of employee development, succession planning. Those are all very important things. They tie into some of the other areas, but those are the areas that we consider the pillars that, if we're not misunderstanding where the board is, we think we've aligned the organization and what we're doing in those areas, because those are the areas that are most important to the board. Consistent with that, what I want to just highlight very briefly is what we did in those areas, what we're doing this fiscal year, because that's really the foundation for us moving forward. We committed to doing 63 miles of road resurfacing. We've accomplished that and more. We are trying to make up for the backlog in reconstruction. I think you're going to hear about that today. We got 8 miles that we committed to doing where we are. We're doing significant things in the area of drainage and dealing with ditches and that nature, and Susan Jackson's going to be talking about that in a few moments after the fire rescue fire assessment presentation. We've done a bunch on countywide facilities. We have a bunch more to do. We're in rather good position for the mid-year supplement coming up, so we're going to be listening to what the board says as we give you this overview in all these areas to make sure that we put those dollars and allocate what's going to be available to things consistent that we know you want prioritized moving forward, because we're going to have some opportunities at mid-year to address some of these things. In infrastructure, maybe it'll be in fire rescue, some of them, definitely definitely in roads, I would anticipate, the board telling us that you want to see us do things in that area. So we're going to be spending attention, listening to what you have to say in those areas today. Also, maintaining and enhancing programs, paratransit service, Space Coast Area Transit. They'll be part of the presentation today. We know that you have an interest in that. And to know that, at least we had some, we have, thanks to the board and what we've done in the last couple of years, we have been able to try to stay par with cost of living increases. We haven't been able to do much more than that. We did do an evergreen study. We did implement some of that. We're trying to do more. There's other opportunities that we're looking forward to working with the board in terms of making sure we have the resources to do things that we know the board feels is important as it relates to recruitment, retention, succession planning issues throughout the organization, in fire rescue, in other departments that are having challenges. Road and bridge has been one area. We've got the resources. You've provided it. We're taking action right now, to be honest with you, to do more in the area of getting recruiters so that we can fill vacancies, because with the market being at in Brevard County, great news is we're at 2.8% for unemployment. That makes it very difficult to fill a number of positions organizationally for us. So we're working on that to get to a better place. Having said all that, what I do want to spend one more minute or 2 more minutes on is to talk about the Citizen Budget Review Committee. The Citizen Budget Review Committee, we've been working, I feel, rather closely with this past year. They've met 11 times. We've had staff there, the budget office. I've gone to several of 2 or 3 of their meetings. They've met 11 times. They've been looking at the budget. They've been providing us input. I believe members of the committee are meeting with commissioners who appointed them, giving them input. We've been listening to them. I think you'll see in the course of the presentation a variety of areas where they've made suggestions. We're heeding to those suggestions, even though it's no formal board action on that. But I can tell you that I think our relationship with them and our partnership with them is that we've provided them the information. They'll probably speak for themselves on the issue when they've requested it. I think staff is trying to be very attentive to it, listening, and then making appropriate adjustments. One of the adjustments, for example, is what we did in Sea Ray Bridge to try to use some resources so we could do more for roads and other areas, and various districts are benefiting from that. You're going to hear, consistent with the pillars, a variety of departments where strategic planning over a 5-year period, where we've started to give you, and you'll see it in the course of this presentation, what we're planning to do over the next 5 years with resources that we believe are going to be available, and where we're headed with that. It's not in every single department right away, but we're hitting the bigger ones. You're going to see that, and so I think we're in a good place with that, but I wanted to let you know that we are taking what they have to say seriously, and we're moving, trying to take their input into consideration as we move things forward. For example, we've committed that we were not going to let any roads go. We've committed this to the board, and I committed it to the Citizen Budget Review Committee as well, that we're not going to let any roads go into reconstruction. So we're working extraordinarily hard to make sure that we honor those commitments. Let me also then stop my part of the presentation with one final slide, which relates to ad valorem revenue. And what Jill indicated to you is when you start with $1.3 billion, that comes down. The real number is, 1/5 of that almost is $250 million is what we're talking about. And that $250 million, when you take everything else out that Jill showed you on the expense side with charter officers, et cetera, we're down to $37 million is really what's discretionary on the board's part when you take everything out. That's the general fund, general government part of what you're dealing with. So from that, all of the general countywide ad valorem revenue, when we look at ad valorem revenue, tax revenue, where are we going to be in light of the charter cap, which is an issue that we deal with repeatedly in Brevard County because of the unique charter provisions that we have. Last year, we were at 2.44%. It was the highest year that we had in several years. This year, the number is 1.81%. That's what we're going to get if we go to the charter cap CPI. That would generate an additional $2.8 million. That's the additional money out of the $1.3 million. That's ad valorem money that will fund whatever it is that you believe is important priorities. And so that's why we're listening to what you have to say in that regard. How does that compare to last year? Well, it's more money than where we were, because we get last year's revenue plus this additional money plus new construction money, which is supposed to help pay for growth. But last year, with 2.443%, that was $3.6 million. So that just gives you an idea moving forward, in light of where the CPI is going to be, what that additional revenue source is. So when we talk about all the very important programs, you know, the job for the county manager, staff, the budget offices, how do we allocate those resources in light of what we know are critically important priorities to the board? So with that, I believe we'll move over and turn over the presentation to Matt and Chief Schulmeyer, and let them talk about the fire assessment and fire rescue.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Can you click? Thanks. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Originally, we were set to kind of go toward the end of this, so I had a pretty funny thing to say that the boss was going to save the best for last. But now that since we're going first, I think he who's last shall be first, and the good book says that. So I'm going to take that on and proceed from there. I want to just first of all say thank you to the commission, and thank you to the county manager for giving us this opportunity this afternoon to talk about public safety, to talk about Brevard County Fire Rescue, and more importantly, the fire assessment. And I would absolutely be amiss if I didn't look over my left shoulder and say thank you to the men and women of Brevard County Fire Rescue for taking time out of their day to be here to support this absolutely critical issue that we face. And I hate it that I have my back to you guys, but thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out. Thank you for your support. We need you guys. We need every one of you guys and ladies and gentlemen to do the things you need to do on a daily basis to provide public safety for the citizens of Brevard County. Thank you for being here. Thank you for support, and let's get on and let's do great things. As y'all know, I'm a military guy, so in true military fashion, there are 3 objectives that I would like to cover today, because every military brief has 3 objectives. So part of our objectives, one, we'd like to socialize the concept of a fire assessment in 2021. Second, we would really love to generate some discussion amongst the commission. And third, really get board direction on what your vision is for your fire department. The fire assessment is a primary source of revenue for fire operations for us. In fire operations, what that does is it provides fire service to all of unincorporated Brevard County. We protect land, people, property, and we assess those property values based on square footage. So as the fire assessment happens, it's a very critical component of what we do from a public safety perspective as we provide those resources to get that done. As we coordinated the fire assessment across the county staff, the county attorney office really strongly suggested that we produced a study for the fire assessment. Because we will be taxing citizens, we wanted to make sure we had a fair and equitable assessment of the tax, that we don't tax one too much or one too little, but that study would help us determine an equal distribution of that tax amongst the requirements that are out there. But I also see a very important second goal of having that study done, and having that study done by a consultant that we'll talk about in a second. Having that study done will give the board an unemotional and unbiased data set where you guys can then provide us the recommendations of how you want to resource your fire department and what level of service you want across Brevard County. So as the consultant and that study provides you that data, it will be unbiased and it'll be unemotional. And it'll be about requirements, it'll be about data, and then we can make those database decisions going forward. Okay, next slide. So one of the 4 main components of what a fire assessment resource is, one of those components is our reserve account. This slide kind of depicts where we've been over the last 15 years, 12 years, as our resources in the reserve budget have been steadily declining. We use our reserves to cover expenses during events, and those events being natural disaster events like hurricanes, wildfires, those kind of stuff. So as those events happen and we sustain damage to stations or equipment, and even the surge in manpower and people that we need to stand up for those events, we depend on those dollars to cover those costs. Our most likely thing that we plan for is a tropical storm event, Category 2 or 3, as a near miss. And as we bring the fire assessment to you, that will be our planning factor of what we think, what we recommend to the board of what those reserve numbers should be. In my opinion, reserves equal risk. The lower the reserves, the higher the risk. The higher reserves, the lower the risk. And again, the board decision will be where do we want to fit in that realm that is most comfortable for you as well as most comfortable for public safety operations across the county. Two previous board decisions greatly influenced our reserve numbers of where they are today. Back in 2009, our reserves were quite healthy, probably too healthy, at the tune of about $14 million on a $60 million budget. So the board at that time made the decision to spend down the reserve line, move dollars from reserve to operations, and move those reserve down so we didn't have to increase the fire assessment. So we forego the fire assessment in lieu of spending our reserves down. Then in 2018, we looked at the line, and the slope of the line was really kind of going a little bit too far for our own safety. We came back to the board, and y'all approved a fire assessment that flattened out our reserve line a little bit. But at that time, we had asked that we think we can make it 3 years. Can we come back in 2021 and relook at this? So that's kind of what this discussion is about, is setting up that reserve, that fire assessment look for in 2021. Part of our limiting process, our limiting factors that we have in reserves and in the fire assessment and in the fire operations budget, or our red dollars, is their one-year dollars. We get infused with those dollars one time during tax season. Throughout the rest of the year, we can't add dollars, we can't add general fund dollars to offset emerging requirements that we have on the fire operations side. That's why the fire assessment and our fire reserves are so critically important. We got one shot at it to get us through the year, and then on the year-to-year basis, as things happen and as events happen, we got to make sure we appropriately plan for those things so we can be ready for them and respond to them in an appropriate and very safe manner. Next slide. I know Commissioner Abati talked about, we won't try to talk about color of money too much, but I'd be remiss if I did not talk about it a little bit here about why the fire assessment is so important to us. We'll start off on the red side, which is our fire operations money. Two primary sources of revenue will go into the red side, or fire ops, which is the MSTU, the fire MSTU, which is ad valorem, and the fire assessment, non-ad valorem. Those two sources of dollars are it. I like to say our red money is X. We get that one shot at what that X is. And as you can see in the red box on the lower right-hand side what that covers. It covers about 250 field personnel, their salaries, their comps and benefits, fire trucks, firehouses. Think everything that it takes to put water on a fire. That is the red side of our financial house. And the house is divided, and it cannot be combined. The other side of the house is our blue money, or our EMS operations dollars. Those are funded with general fund, which are ad valorem, as well as billing, which we bring back to the customer. I think of those dollars as X plus Y. In a budget year, we will budget X dollars on the general fund side for fire operations. But as things happen throughout the year and emerging requirements happen, I can go to the county manager and advocate for those to seek board direction to see if we want to add dollars back to that side. So more flexibility on the blue side, less flexibility on the red side, again, which brings back to the importance of this fire assessment and why we absolutely have to do it right. Yes, sir.
Before you go on, let me speak to this issue a little bit. The reason this is critically important, and we're spending the time we are today on it, because if you go back to the slide that was earlier on where we are in terms of our reserves, once we got to 2018, and you can see where that reserve level is, what that's telling you is that with the fire assessment where it's at, with having utilized reserve dollars every year from 2010 through 2019 to pay operational costs at the current level of service, all the dollars that we get through the fire assessment have to pay what Matt referred to in terms of fire trucks, ladders. In other words, all capital needs, all needs that are related to fire stations. And there's, we've made a variety of areas with indoor air quality issues, et cetera, that we've addressed in the last couple of years. There's more that's outstanding from a fire safety perspective, not only for the people in the department, but for the citizens, and making sure we have the right equipment there. The current flow of dollars that are maxed out, and the payment to all the firefighters for all the service that they are providing relative to fire service, that comes out of this pot of money in the fire assessment. So if we were to look at things as we address things of recruitment, retention, overtime issues, mandatory time issues, how do we address that in terms of staffing, et cetera, that fire assessment pot of money and what you have to spend there is critically important. The board did us a tremendous, we're indebted to the board for what you did in 2018, which you're going to see on the next slide, which is to make up that 15%, which was something that was requested or part of the 2009 or 11 assessment when it was done back there in 2009. We're making up that in the last couple of years. That's what's allowing us to stay a little bit flat on the reserve. But that stops because we reached that point in 2021. And so for us to look at what we know is important to the board in terms of salaries, what's the staffing, what can we do in these areas, when we are doing all we can with the resources there, this becomes the ceiling wherever the fire assessment goes, because we have limited opportunity to do anything in the MSTU, because under the charter you can only raise it to that certain cap unless the board decides to do something beyond that, and we're not looking that the board necessarily is going to head in that direction, because we will have opportunity, and we do have opportunity, to do things on the general fund side in other areas, but you can't raise the MSTU beyond a certain amount because you're capped by what that is. So on the general fund side, for example, there is the opportunity to do more. If we're at 1.81%, well, in certain departments you may not need that amount, or you may be changing service levels, so you still have those general fund dollars. That's not the same case in fire assessment. So when you look to do something for an organization that's 550 plus people, and you see everything that's on the fire operations side of the house, for us to address the things that, at least from a staff perspective, until I hear differently, we need to be taking care of the capital and make sure that they have the right equipment to address citizens' needs. They have to have the right facilities, and we have to address those two issues, and then we can look at all the other issues as it relates to the staffing, where salaries are, et cetera. You have to have the pool of money in the fire assessment addressing that, because if you don't, you can't solve those issues with the MSTU or the general fund alone. They are complementary parts of the solution, but you have to be addressing fire assessment. So that's why you hear us talking about where we think we need to go in terms of getting one done, letting the board know if the fire assessment is X, Y, or Z, what that's going to provide in terms of the services, and that's what we plan to do through utilizing the consultant to give the board that option so we can establish that base moving forward. So with that, let me turn it back over to you and let you go to your next slide.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, boss. I could not have said that better myself, and I probably wouldn't have. Thank you. Okay, so next slide. As County Manager Abate talked about, this was just a recap of what happened in 2018. The board, thank you, board, making for an awesome decision to get us to flatline our reserves. Again, the biggest takeaway on this is we knew it would get us through 2021 and 2021, and is now on the horizon as time flies like it always does. So it's about time to come back. Next slide, please. So as we move forward with the fire assessment, this is kind of our milestones and timelines as what we envision right now to make it executable and get it to a point of decision in front of the board. There's a ton of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of things we need to look at, a lot of stones we need to unturn, and a lot of issues we need to explore about where's the most appropriate spot to spend the next dollar. Dollars are scarce, and we need to make sure we spend them in the correct areas. We want to take an absolute comprehensive look at fire operations and get that total look in that data set to the board about that we're not just segregating one spot or one issue, but that we're looking at everything in total. Our first major step in this would be seeking board approval in March for that consultant for an RFP, bringing that consultant on board, and then starting to partner and work with them, whoever that is, to pull that data together, to work with us, and get that to the board. One of our absolute main tenets that I have that we will move forward is that last bullet on the slide. It is absolutely imperative that we not only team and communicate with our union, but that we work in cooperation and partnership with them moving forward. Our union represents 98% of the folks, or even more, in Brevard County Fire Rescue. They're the voice in the field. They're the voice at the tactical level that puts water on a fire that saves lives. The issues that are important to them are important to us. And we will use that team and use that path moving forward with their inputs to make sure that we are putting, again, the right dollar at the right place at the right time.
Colonel,
Yes,
quick
sir.
question for you, just before you move to another slide. With respect to that consultant, could you give us a little more information in terms of what specifically they're going to be doing?
Yes, sir. Really two things. The first would be looking out across Brevard County to see how we actually assess the tax, to make sure it's an evenly distributed, that depending on the situation of house you live in or a farm you live on or pole barn, that there is a philosophy of an equitable distribution of the tax that covers the property, the value of what our unincorporated citizens have. The second will be to pull data together. We will be doing a facilities assessment and a capital assessment to gauge operational impacts upon our firehouses as well as our equipment to see where those stand, providing that data to the consultant to give them the baseline of what their recommendations were, as well as a look at salaries and people. Pulling those three main components in, and as well as the reserves, and coming up with a comprehensive look across what they're going to do. So I see them doing those two things, and I see my boss
Thank you.
coming in.
Yeah, the bottom line is they will tell you, the assessment will tell you this is how much revenue you're going to generate, and this is what you'll be able to provide with it. And so they do an assessment of that based on data that's provided to them. And that's really where we talked about, wanting to be cooperative, wanting to be on the same page to make sure we're addressing the things that are important. We don't want to be deferring things one area for another unless the board wants to see that. And I would be hopeful that that's not where we want to head. We want to plan for a long-term future, and that's really what we hope the consultant will be helping us do and giving you that picture.
Commissioner Isnardi?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we've had a lot of these problems for a long time. Why did we wait so long to do this, and why are we waiting even longer to get the information from them? I mean, I know it's government and all, but it seems like it's taken forever.
Well,
I'm not blaming you, I'm just saying.
All I can say
'Cause I
is,
think-
the history of where we were in the assessment, what I can speak of is, this team's been together for 3 years. During the first year, we came back to the board because of where the reserves were and where we saw it going, and asked the board for that increase. So all I can speak is to the last 3 years. Why decisions were made previously in terms of spending down reserve, et cetera, because that was the policy direction that the board at the time thought was the best policy to be following. And I can't tell you more than that, except we were clearly following board-directed policy. Is we have a very healthy reserve. It was only supposed to be initially, I believe, 3 years that we were supposed to be spending down that reserve. It ended up being, it lasted because of the things that happened over a 9-year period. There was a time we were going to look at the fire assessment previously, and it just did not get back to the board level.
But I guess I was just under the impression that we would be looking at doing this in 2021, initially, when we initially talked about it.
Well, by the time, so when we bring the consultant on board and they do everything, we believe that it's going to be during 2021, because you need a certain amount of time to get the assessment through certain public hearings, that the board will be giving us the direction with the consultant's results early in 2021, that the board will be able to give us the direction, which of the options, because you'll get more than one option from the assessment, which option do you want us to be moving forward on? when we know where the board wants to be when that happens, in terms, you need to know what the level of service is going to be, what we're going to be able to do in all three of the areas that you're going to hear about in a minute, in terms of the capital, the infrastructure, and then the employee recruitment, retention, and salaries. You're going to get all those pieces, and that'll set, like I said, where we are on the fire assessment side, and then it's going to be our job to figure out how do we make it work for the rest of the organization in terms of the general fund allocations that are going to be required for the other side of the house that Matt referred to.
Yeah, I understand all that.
yeah.
What I'm saying is I guess what I'm saying is there a way that we can move this forward so this is something that we can look at starting or putting in place by 2021? Is that feasible or
Well,
unreasonable?
We're in 2020, we plan to bring it in, we will have the consultant providing that information sometime toward, I guess, either the end of this year or the beginning of the spring. So as soon as we get that, we'll bring it to the board. It's going to take time because I believe statutorily under the assessment, there's certain timeframes that come into
Right.
play.
I know it may be close, but it may be
Yeah.
something that we can look at because,
Yeah.
again, I know it's government and everything moves like pond water, but I
Our goal and this timetable is so that we would be able to address it for 2021, the beginning of that October of 2021.
Yeah.
So that is the goal.
okay, thanks.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, when we did the fire assessment, we didn't have you then. We had Mr. Chief Schulmeyer.
Yes,
And I voted for that. You gave us a good recommendation. I've got a couple questions, though. I think it's been in place now a couple years, so you should be getting like 8.71%. We're getting closer to the 15. So my question is, and this might be one for Jill, I'm curious, we're just flatlining it because we were trying to get it up to where it would get ahead. How are we doing with that, Jill? Because I know the economy got higher. So I'm leading to a question with this. So you're not going to know these numbers right now, and you love it when I do this to you in front of thousands of people, so.
So I know that the board direction was to, because the initial fire assessment had been reduced by 15% to spend down those reserves. And then the board gave the direction to increase it by 6%, and then I think it was CPI until we reached that 15%. So I don't have those exact numbers
knew you
on
wouldn't,
what those
yeah.
are, but I can get those to you. But once we reach that 15%, that's why we need to go out for the new assessment and get a new baseline of where that revenue should be to support all of those needs.
Right, I'm opening up into that. I think that's going to be a really good idea to bring in a consultant because we were kind of guessing before. We knew we had to use a Band-Aid at the time to figure it out. But can I ask you a quick question? What is a responsible reserve amount? Do you do it by percentages or dollars when we're trying to put a reserve in the fire department?
So, I'm sorry.
It's a great question, man. We researched that actually just one day ago.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, our former auditor, CRI, had recommended 10%.
Okay? Which is what dollar amount?
Well, it's 10% off the fire operations, which should be about 3.5 to
It's a
$4
$34 million fire operations budget, so it should be about 3.5 would be the minimum level.
That we
of
would-
what we really should be carrying in reserves.
Okay, that's reasonable and doable. Real quick, I was looking at this slide just before we get into it a little bit more, and it's talking about the field positions, and we got fire operations and EMS. I'm guessing we don't have 430 staff members, but those are people that work dual jobs, and we allocate the payments from the two different revenue sources? Yes, no? And your little cute little squares.
Yes, ma'am. Are you looking at the blue side, the red side, and then the purple side in the middle?
I just looked at the two on the side. I didn't even go to support, but I got 181, I took to the field positions, the other side 249 field positions. Are these actual firefighters that are in the field, 400 of them?
Those are firefighters assigned to fire operations.
400 different men?
There's 249 over in fire operations, there's 181 in EMS, and in support, there's about 123.
Okay, because Frank, I think I only got data on 200 and something, but I'll check into that later. So my question would be is to get to those reserves, when you get your consultant, how long it would be to get to that reserve level? And as we're talking about the consultant, when we send them out, and I like all the data you have coming in for capital and everything, when we get to salaries, what I would like to do, because it's so abstract when we're trying to figure these numbers out, is I would like for them to compare it as far as first responders' salaries with a competitive number. And I would like to throw the sheriff's dollars in with that too and get a competitive first responder all the way so that everybody's kind of operating the same playing field. You know, that we don't have one really out of bounds with the others, that everything's kind of the same. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to try to figure this out under a government entity because it's not in a competitive market. So that would be something that I would like to see you have the consultant look into as we're doing it. So you're going to have to dig into the law enforcement side as well so we can get some numbers. Because I got some ideas maybe down the road, but I'm not sure I even have to have them
Yes,
right
ma'am,
now, but
absolutely.
thank
We
you.
plan on trading Sheriff Ivy a fire truck for Junie, so we'll see if that. But yes, ma'am, absolutely. The sheriff's office, as well as the municipal fire departments that we really compete with, as well as the regional fire departments that we compete with. We want to bring all that data in to see where we're losing our folks to see what competitive salaries, what competitive ranges we need to be
Right.
in, and funnel that to the consultant, again, to give you that unbiased.
Because I know this isn't a popular thing, and I wouldn't even really suggest doing it, but I have so many people talk about privatizing, and it would be bad things with that, so I'm not going to do it. Y'all are okay. But the only good thing is then it would get in the competitive market, and people would find out there's these great jobs, and we don't have that right now. We don't even discuss pays out in the competitive market, and that might bring a lot more people in wanting to do this job, because it's really a great position, wonderful people doing it, and it's an honorable job. So that's where I kind of struggle with that, but I know it's great, these guys are good and they like what they're doing, but there's got to be some way we can get this into a place where they're very happy with their jobs, making a good income with getting that, you know, as far as the sheriff's department and everything on the same field. So we don't have this thing with everybody saying they're leaving us for this amount. We have to look at how much it costs to live in that area. So it's a lot of work, and I know it. But I would really like the consultant to bring us back some information on that as we're making these decisions.
Yes, ma'am,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
To answer your first question about how we get back up to the reserve dollars in our accounts, we'll present options of how quickly we want to get up to the board. Do we want to get up there immediately? Do we want to phase that in? And we'll throw in the risk associated with each of those decisions at that time. So we will absolutely plan for that to have that as tailorable options for the board to choose from. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioners Nardi?
Yeah, I was wondering, do you have any data at all? You know, how we keep talking about losing our people to municipalities because of their grossly inflated salaries and pensions. Now, do we have, I mean, I know our attrition rate is supposedly the same as everybody else's, at least that's what we keep being told. But do we have data on that that shows that? I mean, do we have their attrition rates and their salary ranges, and are they losing employees like we are? Because I'd be really curious to see how many we lost last year, how many unfilled positions we have, and what that looks like.
Yeah, we have it for our department. We have it compared to the rest of our organization. And it's harder to look at the data from other areas, but we can get that and it's available. The question is, of course, how do they determine turnover? And you got to be looking at, apples to apples comparison, because for some it may be as soon as a vacancy. But if the vacancy is because someone got promoted, that's not the same as a turnover in terms of leaving the organization. So,
but my concern is, like, I know we're hiring a consultant that's going to give us a government's hiring a consultant, let's be clear. And we're kind of like at the mercy of what they suggest if we go with their suggestions. And we don't need a consultant to tell us that these are bad things that are happening.
Well,
like, it's not rocket science. So if we can do anything now to try to...
The rocket science part isn't determining for us what our turnover rate is. The important part is, as we give the board the options saying we want to do this for facilities, capital, and you want to address employees in X, Y, or Z way over time, it's for them to come up with the model of what revenue is going to be necessary to do that, and how do you distribute that through the fire assessment. That's really what their specialty is, to determine that pot of money, whatever it is, whether from the 23 million that changes to 24, 25, 29 million a year over time, and with the CPI increase, how does that get distributed among, residential properties by, by square footage, et cetera? That's where their expertise comes in.
And I get that. What I'm saying, though, is if there's anything we can do now to stop the bleeding, then we should be doing it. And then if we need to make adjustments with those few adjustments we're making now, then we do that. But I don't think that we need to wait forever to try to put some positive changes in place.
I don't think that that's what's occurring. We are trying to move in areas, for example, in hiring with temporary positions, doing more hiring, more hiring above the positions that they were allocated. That is ongoing as we speak. We've got a Lean Six Sigma team that is working right now on processes to shorten the hiring timeframe. It's what's called a Kaizen team to do it quicker. We have Orlando Dominguez, one of the assistant chiefs, who's a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, was just assigned to do that so that we can try to shorten those kind of processes. So I want to assure you that we are trying to move in those areas.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Colonel, I've got a couple questions for you.
Yes, sir.
They may sound irrelevant at first, but I promise you they are, at least in my mind, relevant.
Yes, sir.
So are you more of a Beretta 92 or a 1911 type of a guy?
Oh, that's a really 92.
All right. So let's say we give you a Beretta 92, and there's
Only
someone...
because I was an officer.
Nothing again. I've shot the 92. It's a good gun. But let's say we give you your 92. It's an old, beaten 92 that wasn't really taken great care of. You've got that. Someone's got a new HK P30 or VP9 or something. The gun is 8 times as expensive as your old Beretta. Do you think with them being a brand new shooter, you'd be able to outshoot them in all likelihood on the old Beretta?
Depends on the training. Depends on how familiar you are with your weapon, how many times you shot it downrange, and where you are with that.
your whatever your existing level of training is versus someone that, let's say they just turned 21, finally bought a firearm, have been to the range maybe twice in their life beforehand. You think it's going to be much of a challenge?
It shouldn't be.
Okay, so my point, the reason I bring it up, we may get to a position with respect to fire rescue where we have to determine how we want to prioritize personnel versus the equipment that they use. And my thought is, all else equal, I'd rather have folks retained that have the knowledge, that have the investment time and experience to do what they need to do with perhaps not the shiniest, latest, and greatest equipment if we have to make that choice. So I just want to put that out there. Again, I hope that we don't get put in a position where we have to choose between the two, but seeing as how funds aren't unlimited, I would rather focus on the people. So whether that means simply raising salaries to the degree that we can, whether it means adding maybe 6, 10, 12 new firefighter positions to hopefully reduce that mandatory overtime, I would rather focus on checking those boxes first, and then whatever we have left over, look at putting that either into the facilities or into the equipment that they have. So I don't know how other folks feel, but that's something I feel pretty strongly about. Yeah. I don't think they like that.
A lot of people do.
Can I piggyback on that a second, Commissioner?
Right after Commissioner Isnardi.
And I would just suggest, obviously, and I think this goes without saying by Commissioner Lober, is we want to make sure that they're safe. We don't want them using old broke equipment. But I think that, obviously it's a priority, but I would much rather something be a little beat up but safe, but taking care of them so they don't leave. I mean, that's the goal. We don't want a young team that just keeps turning over.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know?
And let me assure the board, none of us are thinking that we want the shiniest, newest equipment at whatever the cost is, because that's what, we're not talking about that. We're talking about safety for citizens and making sure we're at an appropriate level amount, minimum amount for that, and safety for the men and women in the department in the stations that they're at. And what we want to do, and I've tried to, and I've spoken to the union leadership about this on more than one occasion, we want to be on the same page, we want to be aligned with them on that, but that level, which I think is consistent with what I'm hearing the board saying, is fundamental. And if we are on the same page and understand that we need to at least minimally do that, because you're not keeping people when they have mold in their facilities and they don't think it's safe for them. right? And so those are the kind of things we want to make sure we're at the right place. And so, you know, if we are leaving you, if I left you with an impression that we were trying to do way beyond that, and that has to be first, that's not what we're trying to say. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I loved your analogy.
Thank you.
My question would be, because the statement made the other night, it got my attention, is that we're having all these new guys come in, it's cost a lot to train them, and they're leaving. So I would be wondering which ones are leaving. If it's the new ones, maybe we need to relook when we recruit them, maybe the cost of recruitment, what we're doing to energize them, and maybe that's the place that they need the pay raised and not in the other. So I would want to look at all those numbers. Again, I don't have them all, but those would be interesting data points for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you don't want a brand-new pistol someone can't shoot, and then they don't even want to stay. So that caught my attention when it came up the other night. But that's just good management.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, you don't want us micromanaging your department. But those are some things that I would be interested in hearing what people are coming back with solutions as far as targeting these problem areas and what we're doing to solve those areas. So
ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you for that analogy, too. As an older Air Force guy, kind of irrelevant as I get older, at least that we have some function. So, Commissioner, I appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
Did you ever get dirty as an officer? Just curious.
Oh, ma'am. Air Force, we flew in the air. There's no dirt in the air.
Anyway, and I spoke with, that's a poke at Vic back there, or I
I
should
guess,
say
ma'am.
kudos to Vic, who's 22-year Air Force, but he wasn't an officer, so high five, Vic. Anyway, and following what Commissioner Pritchett said, I totally get it. I mean, and I actually I've had these discussions, you know, talking about pay raises for the new guys coming in, but then you got to be careful because I think we've all been around long enough to know that if you increase that pay too much, you've got guys that have been there 3 or 4 years that are making less than the new guys. So that'll be something. But again, and this is not a shot at management, so please don't take it that way. But when I look at this presentation, there's 4 slides that are in great detail, and the last slide is personnel and staff. So I'm just letting you know now that this is a priority for me as well. I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels about it, but if you can't take care of your own, then you might as well not do it at all.
Oh, absolutely,
So-
ma'am. Ma'am, I've got a lot of talking points. I've got very few words on the slides, a lot of talking points.
All right, I'm sorry. I kind of started a little bit of a steamroller here, but
sir.
let me let you get back to your slides.
Absolutely. We're sneaking up on the last 3, which is good, I guess. Next slide, please. And so we talked earlier about the 4 components of a fire assessment and what they resource. One that we've talked about already is infrastructure. We want to look at infrastructure in the terms of operational impact and operational capability, where we provide a priority list of that and balance it up against the others. The most important, one of the things I'd like to bring to the Commission's attention is that last bullet. As populations explode in Brevard County, we are having emerging requirements and new fire stations that will need to be built. And we see that in West Viera, Station 49 is definitely a requirement in the future that this fire assessment would need to address. Next slide. Capital, a lot of the same lines as infrastructure. This is the stuff that we need to get to the fire, the stuff that puts water on the fire. We need to keep an eye on that to make sure that it's up to date and it's safe, that we're not putting our firemen and paramedics at risk, that we're doing the right thing for the citizens of Brevard County. And the last slide, I will take full blame at making this slide the last one, but it's my last slide that I want to make sure that we make the biggest impression on. My time in the military, I learned that F-16s don't fly by themselves, neither do B-1s. We can have the greatest technology in the world. We can have the most awesome capability in the world. But it's people that bring that capability to the fight. If we don't have the people to do that, we won't fight. We can't fight, and we'll lose. We always emphasize people in the United States Air Force. We always emphasize people in every command I've ever been in, to including this job I'm in right now as public safety. I know that I come to work, and I breathe air, and I sign documents. I don't put water on fire. My job solely is to take care of those young men and women who are in the firehouse to make sure that they do have the right resources, the right equipment to be safe, to come home to their families, and to save those citizens of Brevard County. That is my emphasis. That is my direction. That is my goal. That's all I ever want to do. With this fire assessment, we will be able to address salaries, absolutely. Salaries will have an absolute positive impact on recruiting and retention. Absolutely. They will have an absolute positive impact on mandatory overtime and all overtime. Absolutely. Is that going to be a priority for us? Yes, ma'am, Commissioner Zanardi, it absolutely will. Again, we can't put any fire out with equipment or facilities. We need people to do that. And we need the young men and women off my left shoulder to do that. And if we're not focused to take care of them, then I have failed you as a commission, I failed my county manager, and I failed my fire chief to not being able to provide that kind of stuff. So that's kind of all we've got. It was, again, I appreciate your time, I appreciate your compassion and your energy, and I appreciate the direction that you've given us. You've really focused us now and framed in what we need to work on to get this fire assessment to the commission in an appropriate manner, in an appropriate time, to address the needs that we need to do across the county. So again, I appreciate it, and Chief, I've probably taken all the words. If you have anything that you would like to say? No? Okay. He says, go Air Force and aim high and all that good stuff. So, so with that, ma'am, sirs, I'm open for any questions, concerns, comments, or any direction you'd like to give me.
Please.
When we voted the 6% with the CPI bumper with that, if that's something you would have to do now to bring you up to the 15, I wouldn't be opposed voting it through this budget cycle, just bringing you up to that 15% amount. Also, even though you're waiting on the consultant number, I'm just letting you know that I didn't have heartburn with the other, but the chief said that either way would work. But if you're needing that now because we're getting behind, I would probably be okay with that too.
And I'll throw out there as well, you know, I have the same sentiment in the sense that if my house is burning, I don't need a guy with a gun to show up. I need a guy with a hose, or a gal with a hose for that matter. So I don't feel the need to wait until we have absolutely everything perfectly in place to give you some resources to at least start chipping away at the problem.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll double down on that. I voted for the 15% to begin with. I felt that it was extremely important. Having been in business, I agree that you have to have the latest in the equipment to get your job done, but nothing's more valuable to any business, or in this case, the fire department, than the people that you have working for you. And the county manager is absolutely correct. You can't have good quality people and have mold in your firehouses, so you've got to do both. So if we had done the 15%, and if somebody here wants to make a motion, I would certainly second it, that if we can get to the 15% quicker rather than later, then we're going to get where we need to be quicker rather than later. And I think it's important that we do that because, and I've said this before too, and to piggyback on Commissioner Lober, if I'm having a heart attack at 2 o'clock in the morning, I want to make sure that the guy or girl coming to help me knows what they're doing, and they've got experience, and they're backed up with other people that have experience, and that they have the equipment that they need. And I don't want a disgruntled employee because they didn't get a raise or because they feel like they're being slighted. Because I know they're dedicated, but it's really hard to be dedicated when you don't feel like you're appreciated.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Isnardi?
I was going to say, I don't have an issue with it at all, either supporting it. We can probably pretty much gather what that commissioner would vote for, but, I mean, if you've got four people willing to support it, I just want to make sure it's spent correctly. And when you talk
It has to
about,
be done correctly, you're right, because that's what we have to go back to county attorney, because you can't just change the fire assessment. That's why we have to go through this whole process. That's why we had the 15% initially. You have to have public notice.
Yeah.
It has to be mailed out to people. Is a certain time frame. We will look at all that to see what potential opportunity there is to do exactly what the board is suggesting today. But that's that piece going from 8.5 to 15. That may of course it'll help a little maybe on the reserve. That's not where the difference is going to be made. The difference is going to be made in the fire assessment options that are going to be developed as part of this plan, and we work diligently to get it done in an appropriate time frame that we'll try to make the get it to the board by by October of 2021. You can make the decisions that you believe are appropriate to move forward, and we will be very much in a position to give you all the information to help you make the best decisions you think are appropriate.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I'm about to call you Frank, county manager. But that's going to be a little hesitation past this budget cycle. So I would just like to make the recommendation that as you and Jill are putting together the budget, you go ahead and implement, that we would bring them up to the 15% from the initial year. I know we got to send out the notices, but that would be something that I would support, and from what I'm hearing, that we all would support that. And as far as when we do break CPI index, public safety and infrastructure, I don't have any heartburn doing it for those items. So I'm in, and I would like to see that happen.
Okay, so one thing.
Commissioner Snarty?
And I think probably something that you probably mentioned, but you're like me, when you start to ramble, and sometimes it gets lost in the discussion, but you know, for many years, a lot of these places were neglected. So I understand why, at least it's a priority for you as far as getting these stations up to par and you know, making the repairs you need and that sort of thing. But again, I think there's a balance, and I think we pretty much all agree that personnel is important.
I don't think anybody's on a different page on that.
Right. Thank you.
We've got some public comment. I'll just give you all the heads up in terms of the order I'm calling them. It's the order it was submitted. First, we'll have Michael Branson, Ryan Barak, Anthony Zuccarelli, and then Josh Madsden. So, Mike, if you want to come up.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
So how many lights do I have to have on here?
As long as your mic is green, you'll be good. So
Okay.
I'll just put on the record everyone's sitting so that the clerks have that. Altamont Springs for Mike.
Let me push this button here.
If it's green, you're good.
Okay. Thank you, Brevard. Commissioners, I'd like to thank my brothers and sisters for coming and to supporting what we're discussing here today. There's a lot of good things coming in, a lot of good discussion, a lot of good things that the union is very happy to hear the direction we'll be moving forward from here on out. I would like to emphasize the aligned plan that the union and staff and the commission have all been on that has started to create a change in culture in the fire department, which is key, which is what the community looks to for a fire service to bring is culture. Fire trucks are pretty, they go down the street, kids love chasing them. That is a great thing that we're bringing to the community, and that is a unified front and an aligned plan to bring that back into Brevard County. And we're very happy to have that opportunity to do that. What we're looking forward to now is specifically what we've already discussed here. It's a consideration of priorities and, unfortunately, timing. In our current position, you're going to hear a couple other statements. We have a mandatory overtime that you've mentioned a couple times before. Just to clarify, we get to a certain point in staffing where we ask our firefighters, boys and girls, that they will stay an extra 24-hour shift, different than when they choose to make accommodations. I don't have to pick up my kids. I don't have to do X, Y, and Z. They're supposed to go home. They just tended to go home. We ask them to stay to fill the gaps in our staffing. We feel at this point that mandatory overtime is getting to an unsurvivable rate, which puts us in that very delicate issue of timing between infrastructure and stations and emphasizing on our employee. Safety's got to be number one concern. So I stand up here pretty much as a hypocrite stating that I want it all. I want clean stations. I want pretty trucks. I want to be able to do my job in a safe and delicate manner. I want to support my community. I want to support what the community expects out of us, which is exactly what you said. You call 911, you have an expectation of the survivability of the event that you're having. And to provide that service to you, we need to have the entire enchilada. So it becomes a timing and a priority issue. Being that I'm the union president, Michael Bramson, if I didn't say that before, the consideration I bring in front of everyone here is that emphasis and consideration and accommodations be for the employee. Consider the wages. Our contract ends with you on September 30th, 2021. At that time, we have to have wages in place. We have to have funding to the Brevard County Fire Rescue Department to implement a new contract. Everybody's sitting on the edge of their seat behind me, waiting to find out, is that contract going to be something that can allow them to survive the rest of their career here at Brevard? They're waiting to hear what you have to say to put us in the green, whatever the financial term is good to go. So that's what we're looking for. We understand that it's a timing issue. We understand there's a lot of considerations. We understand there's a lot of weight for everybody else who wants to speak today about their budgets as well. But it is a critical function and an essential necessity to Brevard County. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Please.
Hi, you sat down too fast.
Oh, sorry.
You came into my office and
We scared him away.
You guys are so nice. But I think you guys are going to negotiate with that, Jerry, but you just heard us go ahead and agree we're going to pop some more funding in there, and then eventually I think that's what's going to happen down the road. Let me throw out a question to you, because I keep hearing the mandatory overtime. You have to forgive me, I'm an accountant, and I just start thinking through these because I run personnel at where I work. What if we went to 8 or 12-hour shifts and had more people, you could increase the wages then. That way they're making more money. Because there was studies done around the country that when you had first responders, emergency medical that weren't there overnight, it actually increased the safety of the residents. So just something moving forward, maybe kick that idea around. Maybe that's something you guys can bring back and negotiate also as maybe an option. I don't know, but maybe I just want to throw it out to you maybe as another idea.
Yes, ma'am. Do you want an opinion now, or you just want me for the consideration?
No, I would like you to think it through.
Okay.
I think a count to 10 to win, you think through everything and see if you can come up with great options. And when you throw everyone out, then we don't get to good terms. But if you think about that and just kick it around, I don't know if we'll end up there, but I think it's something to think through.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for him?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Ryan, come on up. And you are from Cocoa, sir.
Ryan Barrick from Port St. John.
Port St. John.
It's been a pleasure meeting with you all individually. Thank you for having us to your office. And really have nothing to say. Mike said it all. He usually does. But I appreciate your candor, and thank you so much for your emphasis on taking care of the internal customer here. Thank you so much.
That's quick.
Mike said it all.
Oh, there we go. Anthony Zuccarelli from Indian Harbor Beach.
Unincorporated, Indian Harbor Beach.
Unincorp, all right.
Yes, ma'am. I live here in Brevard. Unfortunately, I do not work for Brevard County Fire Rescue. I am a career fire officer, and I'm here to support my brothers and sisters. Commissioner, I heard you say earlier about wages and where these guys are going. They're coming to my department. I don't want these guys coming anymore. Stay where you are. I want them protecting my family. I want them protecting my daughter. I want them protecting my house. I don't want them coming to work with me. I want them to stay where they are. Commissioner Smith, I've called you, I don't even know how many times. So it's good to finally meet you. Thank you for raising it, or proposing to raise it to 15% to give these guys the money they need to stay where they are. That's all I got.
May I?
Please.
I just want to say, you don't think for a minute I was suggesting I want any of them to go.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I know that you want to study where they're going and why
I
they
can't
are
help it. I
leaving.
have numbers like that. When I can figure out what the problem is, I usually can swoop in with some good solutions and financing for it. So that's all that is. But I love these guys, and I want to keep them. So.
I don't want them coming to work with me anymore.
Well, actually, right now, I don't want them to either, so, thank you.
All right, last but not least, we've got Josh Madsen from Indian Harbor Beach.
Commissioners, directors, citizens of Brevard County, and brothers and sisters. I know you spoke, Commissioner Zanardi, when did this all happen? I can tell you 10 or 12 years ago, 4-star fire department, quality service, all paramedics, equipment. Then the economy, we voted for a freeze back in the time. We were always told, hey, commissioners will take care of us. We take care of them. We vote ourselves a pay freeze. We understand economic times. It's never come back from that. Then it went to the economy went down, kept rolling. We went into the reserves, spend those down. Our wages never went up. Why are some of us here? I've been here 19 years, topped out lieutenant, firefighter, paramedic. Guys are leaving us, and in 5 years, they make $15,000 more than I make now. All right, plus they have something called Kelly days, so they get 17 more 24-hour shifts off a year. That's about a month and a half less they work a year and make $15,000 more in a year. So I would like that when we do have the consultant come in, look at the hourly. If we just say annual, those guys work a lot less hours annually than we do. All right, in a lot of those departments with 3-week Kelly days. So I would like that included too, so you can actually see apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So that can was kicked down the road for many years. That's where we're at today, if you've asked. Every year it's gotten kicked. I've seen it. I was in Mike's position for many years, got too frustrated, couldn't do it anymore. Both sides. I got lied to many times. That's one thing I can't stand for. I'm not saying it was you guys. I'm just saying in all realms, from my guys everywhere I went. Quality over quantity. Can we get people? We can get some people now. Is it the quality we used to get? No. I'll tell you honestly, no. Why am I here? Because my family's here. My friends and my neighbors are here. I'm here to serve them. All right, and I know if I leave, I show up on calls, guys, it's truth. People are disgruntled, they're upset, they're underpaid, they can't afford their bills. All right, and then guess what? They just lost 2 people from their department that just left to go somewhere else. Guys that you focused on training that you thought would be here, they're going to turn around, they're going to leave somewhere else for $15,000 more. Day one starting, they're going to get a $15,000 increase. And work, like I said, 17 less 24-hour shifts, a month and a half less a year. You can't keep somebody if you're not trying in that era. And I hear all the hey, fire truck, put the fire out. We do a lot more than that. Just so the citizens know, we run every motor vehicle accident that you see. We're the ones there clearing the road, helping the patients. We run all the EMS calls. We're there. You have a fall. Your elderly patient has a fall. Your parents, someone needs help off the toilet. Someone needs help out of bed. We run all those calls. So a lot of people are just like, oh, I don't see that many fires. It's not. That's the small part of our job. Our EMS is about 85% of what we do, and we do it all day long. You know, water rescue, trench specialty, we have everything in our department. That's what we do. So like I said, the pay difference is huge. They're going to leave because of that. All right, and quality is quantity. You get what you pay for. We all know that when we buy cars, when we go out to eat, everything you do. Sorry, I'm out. Get what you pay for. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so
Josh,
much.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I mean, admittedly, now believe me, if anybody, and there's probably more people in this room than has been in a long time that probably know my position on pensions and that sort of thing. I've had my battles with my municipal, when I served in municipal government. We don't have that problem here. So for me, it's a really very black and white. We have FRS, a very strong pension state system. So I have no issue with that. But how do you suggest when some of these municipalities, I mean, never mind the fact that most of these pensions aren't funded. Never mind that they're 60, 50,
Well, now,
40.
I'm talking FRS pensions. A lot of them, if you go to OIA.
No, but what I'm saying to you is, how do you expect, like, there's got to be something else, whether it be wage, because we can't offer it to you guys in the pension because you're part of the FRS. But that's actually a good thing, because then we can take care of you on the salary end. And that's why for me, this is easy. Because
Well,
we're not giving you 100% or 80% of your pay when you retire, plus
Right.
$25 per month per year of service, plus complete nonsense that's going to bankrupt a self-funded pension. So that is the core difference between this department and many municipal departments. And I guess my point, and maybe it's more of a statement, but my point is, I don't know that we'll ever be able to compete. How do you compete with somebody who retires in their 50s, early 50s, that's making $85,000 a year when they retire?
Well,
And then,
that's
oh,
just-
by the way, these municipalities have worked it in such a way, because they kind of own their politicians, is they somehow come up with a drop, because FRS has a drop. That's like you bring up the Kelly days, and it just makes me cringe. 17 days of paid 24-hour shifts? That's ridiculous. That's
So-
ridiculous in any department.
We-
But I would rather me personally, I would rather much more take care of you, because you have the pension, which is good, and then you can opt for an additional pension. But I would much rather take care of you on the salary end, and that way your family and you are seeing that money now, and then you still have that nest egg for when you retire, and you still have the drop, so you can still save money that way. But I think it's great. I think FRS is one of my favorite things.
I love it.
You don't lose sleep
FRS
over
is
it.
wonderful. And we see a lot of them leave down there. I have a hard time telling a new employee that comes to me to ask for advice, for family advice and life advice. I have 19 years. I am the highest I can get as a lieutenant paramedic in our department, $72,000. Highest I can get. And I work right at 2,912 hours a year. Go down south, they're going to work 2,500 hours, 400 hours less. All right, so a month and a half, almost 2 months less. And their fire medics are topping out at 85,000 in 10 years. So let alone they make lieutenant paramedic, they're at 115, 125.
But none of them are guaranteed a pension till they die.
They're all FRS. Oh, no, they're all FRS.
Oh, no, those are
down south.
FRS,
Yeah, they're
okay.
all FRS.
But
So
I'm
what it
saying-
is when they go down there and they go to retire, I have to work, normally in a regular year, I'm working, like I said, a month and a half or 2 months more worth of hours. But on top of that, I'm only at 72.
But when
They're
we lose
lieutenants down
somebody,
there.
when we lose somebody to Melbourne, Palm Bay, and that, that's the reason why. We
Well,
lose them
we lose them
because
there
of their
because they don't
pension.
want, some of the EMS work, and then, honestly, they look at the budget. They look at the direction we've been heading, and that slide shows you. If you come to me and say, what's your faith in Brevard? And I'm going to be honest, I don't lie. When I was young, I was 2 years on the job, they said, you need to go somewhere else. I said, no, I live here. This place is going to get better. And they're like, it'll never get better. It's Brevard County. We're behind on everything. All right? That was 17 years. I got 19 years on, so I was 2 years on at that time. 19 years later, sadly, it's true.
But it
I'm
can't
not
be
gonna lie
that
to
bad.
you.
It can't be that bad, Josh, because you're still here.
Because
And I'm
I live
glad,
right down the street and I
and I'm-
protect my family.
and I'm glad
But if I
you're
would have
here.
left, I can tell you, if I would have gone to OIA, if I would have gone there,
But OIA is a whole different department,
I'm
you
just
gotta
saying,
admit. But what I'm saying is,
45
I
minutes
am,
away.
let
It's
me say
close.
this, I am very glad you're here.
Thank you.
Don't ever doubt that for a second. But what I'm saying is, there is some value. We just need to fix
Yeah. Well,
what's wrong, what's
I love
broken.
my community. I want to stay here. But like I'm telling you, a lot, like this gentleman back here, he can't afford to work in Brevard. He will drive 40 minutes, 30 minutes. Guys, I have tons of friends that live in Indian Harbor with me, that none of them work in Brevard. And sadly, they laugh at me. They're like, oh man, you should come here. We get our Kelly days, we get paid this.
But what do
run
they
just
always
as many
say about
calls.
Brevard? Brevard's the real firefighters. That's
No,
what.
they call us for stupid, but hey, for
No,
staying,
that's-
they say we're stupid for
that's-
staying.
No,
But
that's the feedback I get.
well,
They're the
that's
real
because
deal.
they hire us. We're the training ground of Florida. Sadly, we
Well,
lose everyone, but
just
we
give
have
us-
good firefighters.
But
We
give
just
us a
keep turning them
chance,
over.
give us a chance, and
I-
we'll
I-
try to at least
I
correct.
have faith in you guys. I pray
what we
that you
can.
guys will help us. That's what
But
we need.
again, my whole point was the initial part of the discussion was, you guys don't have a pension system that's fragile. And that's what I
Right.
used to tell when I was in the municipalities. You don't know that pension's going to be there in 20 or 30 years when you're 60, 50, 40% funded, and at the mercy of a board that makes your investments. I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me.
Oh, no, I agree with with a lot of the municipalities around here. I would agree with you 100%. But we don't lose a majority of our people to our municipalities. We lose them to other counties, South Florida, and that's because we open up a hiring process. We can't get anyone else from around here, so we're hiring everyone from outside because they need that job to start.
Well, we're going to look at
And
that
then they
too.
go.
So, I mean.
Final thoughts, Commissioners Nardi?
Sorry,
Any
I know,
final thoughts?
I'm sorry, just like a whole conversation here, but
no problem. Apologize for taking your time.
thanks, Josh.
So no problem.
Josh,
Thank you.
how long have you worked here?
19 years.
How old are you now?
I am 41 right now.
Can't
Okay,
ask a
good.
man his age.
Well, no,
That's all right.
good for him.
I'm proud 41-year-old.
But the good thing is you're going to get to retire soon, too, so that's wonderful.
Well, and that's the thing too, firefighters' health though. So
Yeah.
I hope we got it.
Well, I hope you look pretty healthy.
Thank you. Try to stay healthy.
Just one comment on that. I do agree with the pension. I'm really glad you guys got that, but that does free up some more money for us also. But another thought on that, we've had a couple guys come up that've been here a while, and they live in other areas, and they come over here to work. So I don't know, we're just gonna have to balance that. I'm listening, I'm gathering data. So, but I'm just looking for good information and truth, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I can't believe you actually asked me to stop talking because I'll just say, I'm just kidding.
Why does everyone find that so funny? I can't
Kurt's laughing
imagine.
pretty hard over there.
All right, we'll go ahead. We're going to do roads and bridges. If everyone still feels good to kind of muscle through that, then we'll take a break after that, okay? All right. All right.
He's not doing the talking for that.
You fine? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was going to get a break and I was going to get to go to the bathroom. So, come on. That'll make it go faster.
All right, I think we have seating room now, so anyone that was standing, if you want to grab a seat, go for it. No, you're fine. Don't be so self-conscious. No, you're fine. I was polite about it. Well, I don't know. Do you think we'll have someone ready to go with this in a couple minutes, or should we take the break now?
We're sitting here waiting. We're ready for you.
Oh, let's do it. I was
Okay.
waiting on you guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, let's do it.
You ready? Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to start us off with a report on our road program. In 2017...
Before you do that, let me at least introduce you. This is Susan Jackson, our Assistant Director in Public Works.
We know her. Thank you, Frank. In 2017, we presented this board with a significant amount of road backlog that had accumulated and needed to be addressed. Now, that backlog was calculated based on a 2011 pavement condition assessment. Typically, for a county of our size, Those assessment updates are done every 3 to 5 years. They cost, on average, about $400,000. Between 2011 and 2017, there was no funding available for an update. So we relied on the 2011 pavement condition assessment to project those roads forward. So we brought you the accumulated backlog, and with that backlog, we brought you a 5-year plan on how we were going to address the backlog, and that's what you see on the slide before you. Now, as we developed that plan, we had 2 notable challenges. Our first challenge was that the majority of our backlog was roads at risk of falling into reconstruction. So why was that a concern? As you know, roads that have to be reconstructed cost 4 times the amount of road resurfacing. So what we had to do in developing the plan, we had to come up with a very cost-effective strategy. And that strategy, what we decided was that we were going to attack those at-risk roads first. And that's exactly what we've done, and that has been one of our primary objectives. The second challenge we had was that some districts had more at-risk roads than others. As an example, and you can see it on the screen, Commissioner Pritchett, in particular, has more of the roads in the county than the other districts. But when we look at the percentage of at-risk roads, her percentage was 24%. Now compare that to Commissioner Smith. He has less of the roads, but he had more of the at-risk roads. He had about 30%. On the far left, you can see our proposed miles in fiscal year 17-18. That was the first year we started the program. And the percentages that you see there are the actual percentages of backlog that each of you had in your district. So to deal with this challenge, we asked the board for some leeway in developing the plan. And so what we did from after year 1, we adjusted that percentage every year so that in year 5 and the years going forward, we would then sync the percentage, the amount of money, the percentage of money that we would spend on road resurfacing would be synced with the percentage of miles of road in your district. So that's a little background on on how we developed the plan and a few of the challenges. So let's take a look at our progress. Again, looking at the bottom, the total miles, you can see that the first year, the goal you set for us was 55 miles. We delivered more than 64 miles. The second year, the goal was 61 miles. We delivered more than 70 miles. This year, we planned 63 miles. This year and the 2 years following, 63 miles. And currently, we're 40% complete this year. We're on schedule and on budget. As you can see, throughout the year, the past years, what we've done is we've increased the amount of roads that we're paving. And we've done that with additional resources that this board has provided with the idea, and we've put them right back into road surfacing, again, with the idea that some added assurance to make sure no road falls into reconstruction. That has been one of our primary objectives with our road program. And it has been the commitment that we made to this board and that we made to the Citizens Budget Review Committee. So, excuse me, So moving on to road reconstruction on this slide. So while we were focused on making sure that we caught those at-risk roads from falling into reconstruction, this board wanted to do more. They were committed to doing more, and in particular, you wanted to address the roads that were in serious to failed condition, where we had no other option but to reconstruct. You wanted us to tackle that. You gave us additional resources. With those resources, we created this 5-year plan. As you can see in year 1, again on the far left, we started out reconstructing 4.63 miles. We actually exceeded that goal. We've increased every year. We've increased the amount of miles that we're reconstructing. This year we'll be reconstructing 8.03 miles, and then you can see that we're going to level off based on the available funding. Yes, sir.
Does this tie into the percentages with each district as well as the, I guess, the prior slide with the, just the re-blacktopping
No,
and the
sir.
resurfacing?
No, sir, and what you'll see is that based on the assessment that we had there in the south part of the county, we had the greatest amount of road reconstruction that was needed. That said, we did make sure that as best we could, based on the funding, that we did reconstruction in every district.
Perfect, thank you.
So, you know, again, we wanted to let the board know that that's just kind of a quick overview on our road resurfacing and reconstruction. I'd also like to add that staff has done a tremendous job executing this program. They've been very committed to to meeting and exceeding, as you can see, a lot of our goals. And that's because we know that roads have been and continue to be a top priority for this board. I want to go back and I'm sorry, the question, I want to go back and address the money. If you'll look in this fiscal year, you'll see that we have a bump in the funding. It's $4.9 million. That came about the funding for Babcock. And commissioners, we're very grateful that you gave us that funding. Originally, we were going to pave 1.26 miles. As you can see, in January, we completed 3.29 miles of Babcock. It looks great, and we're excited to move forward and tackle the next 9 miles of Babcock Street that we have. I also want to point out on our road program, something that this board and the Budget Review Committee asked us to do. They recommended that we always have a 5-year plan through strategic planning, and you can see that's exactly what we've been doing. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Okay, so we took a look at the miles of roads that we're doing and how well we're doing there. But how does that effort all translate into the health of our roads? If you remember previously, I talked about a tool that state and local governments use in order to gauge the health of their paved roads. And that tool is a pavement condition assessment. Again, last year, and thank you, this board funded an updated pavement condition assessment. So with that information, Public Works is very happy to deliver to you today a favorable report card. So let's take a look at that report card. As you can see, in 2011, your score, the overall score for county roads was 66, which was fair condition. Today, the overall score is, the PCI rating is 79, satisfactory. Now, just a little background, when the condition of roads are evaluated, they're given a numerical score from 0 to 100, 0 being the worst possible condition a road could be in, and 100 being the best possible condition for a road. So that's what that PCI stands for, Pavement Condition Index, and it is a numerical value. Looking at your district on the chart, to the left you see that in 2011 you see your score, and then to the right you see your 2019 score on the roads in your district. As you can see, all of you have improved substantially. You'll also notice that we've increased our centerline miles of roads by about 20 miles. We now have close to 1,126 miles of roadway. To the right, you see the percentages of roads that you have of the overall road inventory. And again, I want to go back to that first slide. The percentages you see here will be the percentages that we will use in year 5 and going forward in how we distribute the resurfacing money. Our next report card looks at roads by classification, by functional classification. This one's important because the arterial and collector roads are the ones that most people travel. So if you look, our arterial roads are comprised of more than 9% of our overall inventory. They have a score of 82. Our collector roads, we have more than 12.5% of those at an 81. And then, of course, local roads comprise the majority. They're over 78% with a score of 79. Looking down the bottom, the chart you see there, the yellow bars are the 2011 assessment, and the green bars are the 2019, so that you can clearly see we are making progress. This one, the dreaded pothole that everybody hates, we thought the board might be interested in this, that since 2016, we've had a 56% decrease in the number of pothole repairs, with the biggest decrease between years 2017 and 2019, and that's because of this board's commitment and investment in our road program.
So that's not because we just let them be at this point? Okay.
No, sir. Okay, so based on that new assessment, Our consultant took our roads and they categorized our roads based on national standards and the PCI score. So what you see to the left, you see that we have 498 miles of roads that are in good condition. I think 320 that are in satisfactory. Now, as we move right, we start seeing roads that need to be resurfaced, and then right of the yellow bar, we start looking at major rehab and reconstruction. Based on the new assessment, we currently have 306 miles of backlog. I want to kind of set up a future slide where I'm going to show you what our program's going to look like in years ahead. So our backlog is the yellow all the way to the right, resurfacing through reconstruction. But remember that to the left of us, we have the roads that are in satisfactory condition. Just like all infrastructure, roads age, and each year a certain amount of miles of roads are falling into resurfacing. So keep that in mind as we go forward in one of the future slides. This is just a quick comparison between the 2011 results and the 2019 PCI results. The blue bar represents the 2011, the orange represents the 2019. As you can see, we've made substantial progress in all areas. If you look at that 2011, we had 664 miles of backlog. Today we have 306 miles. Commissioners, this is just a quick look at our maintenance and repair activities. You know, again, these are our roads organized by their condition and their scores. The important thing on this slide is, as I said, we have 306 miles of backlog. If we were to take care of that backlog today, it would cost us $87.5 million. I also wanted you to see that as we look at, as an example, the poor roads, there are a variety of treatments and techniques that we use. The roads in this category, they cost more than roads to be resurfaced, but they do not cost as much as roads to be reconstructed. So what we look at is we take every road individually and look at cost-saving strategies in order to repair that road to get it back to a PCI of 100. This is the slide I wanted you to, that I was setting up before. Remember the green bar where we had 320 miles in satisfactory? Well, this slide takes a look at the road ahead. And again, this is consistent with us looking at the next 5 years, always looking forward, never looking back. If you look at the red line to the left of it, those are the 3 years remaining in the road program that was started in 2017, 2018. If you look to the right, that's the next 5 years. So I'd like to set this slide up. The first bar to the far left, at the bottom, that's the miles of roads that we will reconstruct and resurface this year, 71 miles. At the top of the bar, you see 306 miles of backlog. So once we resurface those, once we pave those roads, that will leave us with 235 miles of backlog. But remember, we've got to catch those roads that were to the left of the yellow. We've got to catch them as they fall into resurfacing. So we never go back to this place of accumulated backlog. So what you see the next year, we'll start off with 255 miles. We'll pave 71. We'll catch 18 miles of backlog moving forward. Another important part of this slide is that we predict that in 2024, based on the data that we're seeing now, and of course we'll need a new one in about 3 years, but based on the data that we're seeing now, we will eliminate the road reconstruction program in 2024. And we will have caught all the at-risk roads. Now what we need to do at that point, going forward, we begin transitioning from this primary objective of catching roads before they fall into reconstruction to extending the service life of a road through preservation and maintenance. So we then start lowering the number of roads we resurface, because once we reach 2027, our backlog will be zero. What we do going forward is we just continue to resurface roads that are spilling over, that are aging and spilling over. So it's a resurfacing effort. Okay, so moving from roads to drainage, this has been another important priority for the board. If you remember, back in 2017, 2018, we've been inundated with flooding complaints. So to respond to our citizens, this board gave us resources to create 2 additional crews and some equipment. So now we have 1 crew stationed in the north part of the county, 1 in the central part of the county, and 1 in the south part of the county. And all they do is clean ditches and reshape swells. So again, this is our 5-year plan. We just wanted to let you know what we did with the investment. This is our 5-year plan we created. You can see that the goal for 21, 22, we should be cleaning 90 to 100 miles of ditches each year. Previously, we were doing about 30 miles. We'll also be transitioning from a 10 to 12-year cycle to get to a ditch to a 3 to 5-year cycle. So again, this is just an update. We'll continue bringing you year after year an update on where we're at.
I just want to throw out a thanks to the Sheriff's Office as well. In particular, I'd asked them if they could help us take over some of the mowing requirements using inmates so that we could take the folks that were mowing and use them to clean up the ditches in certain parts of Merritt Island. And my understanding, I don't recall if it's Judson or Sea Ray Drive, but they were going to take over one of them and mow that for a little while just to help us catch up some.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. We really appreciate that, too. The sheriff has been very good about giving us weekend warriors and additional assistance. Okay, so we've talked a lot about roads, we've talked a lot about drainage, but another area of our transportation infrastructure that we've not talked so much about is our bridge infrastructure. And if you can see on the slide, what you're seeing is our county bridge inspection results. We have 46 bridges in the county. DOT inspects those bridges every year. They inspect 38 of the bridges. 8 of the bridges were previously inspected by county staff. So based on the most recent inspection results, you can see that we have 36 bridges in good condition. We have 6 bridges that are in poor to fair condition. I'll talk about the poor and fair on the next slide. So thankfully, we do have those 36 bridges are in good condition. But bridges, much like roads, if we do nothing with them, if we do not create a program and we do not dedicate funding to keep them in good condition, they will fall into major repairs and replacement. So at the bottom, what you see, again, based on the inspection results, we've gone through all the bridges, and you can see that these are unfunded repairs that need to be made to the good bridges in each district. It's about a little over $3 million. Also, I wanted you to take a look in the far left. You can see the age of bridges. We've got 1 bridge over 80 years, and we've got 9 bridges 50 to 60 years old, and 4 that are 40 to 50 years old. Now, DOT has, in their 2018 report on bridges, they said that bridges that are designed today have a life expectancy of 75 years, but bridges designed before have a life expectancy of about 50 years. So you can see we're getting very close to the life expectancy of our bridges. Now, in that same report, they recommended that we have an aggressive maintenance program, that be our strategy. So again, that we can extend that service life. And that is exactly what Public Works is wanting to do. So let's take a look at the roads that are fair to poor. Some of these you're very familiar with, like the Sea Ray Bridge. You can see that we have funding for that. But again, that road fell into poor condition, and it's going to cost us about $5 million to replace. On the other hand, we have Micco Road over San Sebastian Canal. If you remember the previous slide, that bridge is 80 years old. So it has far outlived its service life, and it needs to be replaced. We have put Band-Aid after Band-Aid on it, and it's not working. So we have that's about a $1.8 million unfunded cost that we need to plan for as soon as possible. We've also got the Tucker Lane Bridge, which is functionally obsolete. That one is also unfunded. So currently for the Poor to Fair bridges, we have $5.4 million that's funded and $2.3 that's unfunded. So our action plan to deal with this is we've got to develop a plan, very consistent with what this board and the Citizens Review Committee continues to ask us to do, is to plan ahead. With that plan, we need a funded bridge program, and inside of that program, we need a replacement plan so that we can prepare for these bridges that are reaching their service life. In addition to that, we also want a consultant to do an evaluation on these bridges, very much like the pavement condition assessment. They would do the same thing on our bridges and help us with maintenance and repair strategies and how to budget that going forward. We'd also like to outsource the 8 bridges that previous staff was doing. We no longer have a structural engineer, nor do we anticipate that going forward. So we'd like to outsource that. To oversee the program, we need one dedicated position to managing the program. And of course, the program would have to have recurring funding in order for it to work. And that's all I have for you on my part of the road and bridge. And Karina?
Thank you, Susan. Okay, Commissioners, as we talk about these roadway improvements, we also need to talk about the growing unfunded roadway capacity improvements needed on our transportation system. This list that you see here, it includes all of our arterial and collector roads that are at or above 80% of the maximum acceptable volume, or MAV. The MAV can be considered the capacity of a road for planning purposes. The 2018 volume in vehicles per day that you see there, that is the most current data that we have available that the Space Coast TPO collects and provides to us. The existing capacity has been determined based on the desired level of service that the county has identified in our comprehensive plan, and it's also consistent with Florida's quality and level of service guidelines for the traveling public. The last column you see there is the ratio of the existing volume over the capacity. And for example, you can see that a segment of Grissom Parkway is at 80% capacity, or was in 2018. We know that some of these roads have experienced a significant increase in traffic volumes since 2018, and maybe closer or over capacity at this time. The values that you see in red are identifying the roads that were already over capacity in 2018. A lot of these are in the South County, and we should be planning to address those. This slide is the same list of roads as the previous slide, and it includes the associated planning costs for roadway widening in order to increase capacity. Our current total estimated planning cost is in the area of $470 million, and we don't have a source of funding over time to address these issues. The current funding streams that we have available to us are largely dedicated to the roadway maintenance efforts. But the good news is that we continue to pursue grants with these specific needs in mind, and there are interim solutions that cost a lot less that we can consider to be able to improve the quality of travel for the folks in Brevard County. And with that, John will speak more on that on the next slide.
Okay, Commissioners, in the planning of transportation improvements, at least the capacity improvements, as we have moved through the last, I'm going to say 4 to 5 years, we have reduced the amount of funding that was available for that purpose and in favor of doing more maintenance, as was just mentioned. This is a good investment because of the cost of reconstructing a road as compared to resurfacing is so devastating that you just about have to do it that way. But in so doing, we also begin to fall further behind in terms of developing new capacity. Again, the maximum acceptable volume, or the MAV, we've talked about that recently in a board meeting, and and we're talking about it again today. And as more roads get into that 80% or worse volume category, then we're going to be starting to hear it even more from our citizens, of course. At this point, the amount of funding that we have going to capacity is pretty much limited to occasional little bits of gas taxes that we can send towards it, and then other than that, it is pretty much limited to transportation impact fees. And Tad's going to be talking about the history of the impact fees here in just a moment. In addition to the impact fees, though, and the gas tax, we do seek grants, and sometimes we get good grants. Sometimes we get federal funds, which might fund an entire project. But usually it's a 50-50 grant. So we've got to have funds to be able to match the grant funds. The options on that, we've talked about in the past, the increase in gas tax. We could go as many as 6 additional pennies in gas tax. There's infrastructure sales tax, there's a services tax, but I really not want to talk about those too much today. There's some alternatives, but none of them are what I would call fun. However, as Karina did say, we are looking at and trying to exploit opportunities to use ITS and intersection improvements that will improve the efficiency of our corridors. And by doing that, we can relieve a lot of the congestion on the roadways, and so they'll feel less. They'll feel like there's less volume on them when in reality there might actually be more. But if we run very efficiently, then we'll do a little bit better. We do have a growing ITS program, but as far as the growth that it has, we can use impact fees for that. We can also use other funds as well for transportation purposes. So we're looking to that option to increase or maximize our capacity. Far cheaper, dollar for dollar, than putting new pavement down on the road, but eventually even that will be exhausted in terms of improvement. And we will then be having to look at additional pavement or new corridors or something of that sort. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Tad for the impact fee history.
Commissioners, did you want to go through the impact fee stuff before you take a break? That's up to you.
What do y'all want to do? I'm okay either way. Yeah, we'll take a break. And I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes is probably realistic. We'll reconvene about 5 after.